Hello and welcome viewers to History in Lowell with me, Maritza Grooms, and my own personal professor, Forrant. Today we have a very special guest with us. Welcome Professor Ardeth Thawnghmung, Chair of Political Science at UMass Lowell. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Of course.
Thank you.
So just to recap for our viewers and for Professor Ardeth, we have been talking about immigrants in Lowell since the mid-19th century, mid to late 19th century, just how they've come here, why they've come here, and what they were coming from. And then we've gotten to recent times with more refugees and how Lowell has been a safe haven for refugees. And more recently, we've been talking a little bit about the populations that have been coming in. And one of those populations is the Burmese population, right? So that's why you're here today. So can you tell us, first of all, let's talk about Burmese refugees and the hard questions. Why are they coming here? What are they coming from?
Okay, so let me start with a brief history of Burma. Myanmar, or Burma, is a very diverse country made up of 100 culture and language groups. And the majority group is called Burma, or Burman, which constitutes about 68% of the population. The rest of them are 100 culture and language minority ethnic groups. And Myanmar has been ruled by a military regime between 1962 and 2010. And the military government was very repressive. And these refugees are victims of civil war between the military government and different ethnic armed groups that took up arms against the government since Myanmar gained independence in 1948 from Great Britain. And these groups took up arms to ask for greater autonomy and independence from the central government dominated by the majority group. So over the years, we have a constant civil war between the Burmese government and ethnic minority armed groups, and the civilians suffer as a result because of the harsh military campaign against these refugees. So many of the refugees belong to minority ethnic groups, and they live in the border areas. And in the 1980s, they started fleeing to the border areas and crossed the border into Thailand, and many of them stay in the refugee camps in Thailand-Burma border, some of them 10 and 20 years before they are resettled to the United States or various countries.
So that's what we've been talking about with refugees. We often see this displacement.
Long time in camps.
Right.
Conflict.
So Thailand, so were they in the camps in Thailand in the same areas of Thailand as Cambodians were who were fleeing the Khmer Rouge, or were they in different parts of the country? Or
different parts of the border area. Thailand and Burma has a long border areas, and then I think they have about 8 to 10 camps, so they're from different refugee camps.
So Thailand became a place that a lot of people went to.
Yes.
Wow, wow. But life in refugee camps can't be easy, especially spending 10 to 20 years.
Right. I think it's almost like living in a prison. The freedom of movement was restricted. They did not get to go outside the refugee camps, and they were mainly relying on assistance from non-profit, non-state government organizations, international organizations that brought in assistance. So they were giving some food and basic food stuff. So they were basically living like that, depending on assistance from outside foreign assistance for a long, long time. Yes.
Wow. Wow. So, wow, thank you so much for giving us that background. But here we are in Lowell, and you're doing this work here. You helped to found a community action group, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. So this community group is called Sedana Community Development Center, and Sedana in Burmese means goodwill. We started with a loosely organized network of Burmese volunteer groups, and these Burmese American citizens who have been here for maybe 10 or 20 years. We're already here. And so we try to, we formed this group to provide various assistance to these refugees who started coming in, starting in 2007. And in 2012, we became a little bit formally organized, and we started including some non-Burmese, some of them are from UMass Lowell, some of them are professors from UMass Lowell, and community leaders here to form a more formally structured organization. We became article organization. Although we're not 501c yet, we have our fiscal agent, and that's where we started doing our work. But I'm really proud to say that now, 10 years later, Sedona Community Organization is run by the refugees themselves, and we are 100% self-supported. All the funds are raised by the refugees through various fundraising activities. And they're running the organization, and we're not relying on any on grants from any other area. So we're just 100% self-supported and relying on volunteers.
Wow! Yes. So it's a volunteer-run organization.
Right. Right.
That's 100% self-supported. That is really impressive. That is incredible that the community, the Burmese community here, came together in that way.
Yes.
And that's one thing that we talk about all the time, community coming together and helping each other and supporting each other, especially through such a hard time.
Right.
So why Lowell?
I don't know. That's the U.S. government came up with a program to resettle these refugees. When these refugees got to Thailand, they applied for asylum and through the United Nations agencies. And I think it depends on the host, the presence of different resettlement agencies. So in Lowell, these refugees were brought through International Institute, right? So, however, half of the refugees who were resettled in Lowell already left Massachusetts because of the high cost of living. So the living cost is cheaper in other areas like Minnesota or Indiana or Nebraska, and many of them found out that Massachusetts is not a very, welcoming place in terms of cost for them. So half of them have already moved out. So
have other people, so in the case of Cambodians, I know that as people settled, eventually then actually from other parts of the country, people moved.
Right.
So is that to Lowell? So has that happened as well, where there were families that might have been scattered?
Very few.
Different.
Right. Very few of them will move into here. We have more people who are moving out. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah. How many would you say, how many people make up the Burmese population in Lowell today? Do you know off the top of your head?
Over 200 people, and a very small number, and 45, 50 families. Yes. I forgot to mention about the various services Sedona provided. So from the very beginning, we offer some assistance in terms of helping them navigating the system, either be this healthcare or educations, or providing some English language classes, running after-school programs, and helping them with advocating for their cause, either in terms of dealing with the service providers as well as the landlords. So we provided all these assistance, all these programs, and these programs are still continuing. Especially the after-school program has been running for 6 or 7 years, and mainly with the volunteers from UMass Lowell.
Wow.
Yes.
Some of my students, I think.
Yes, yes.
So have you seen yet the children, let's say, who are in those after-school programs, or some of them now ending up at Middlesex Community College or at or at UMass Lowell, or even at some other college or university? Are we at that point where there's a next generation that's sort of going out there and making their way?
A handful of them are attending school at Middlesex Community College. So not to UMass Lowell yet, but I can see this in a couple of years, all of them transferring into UMass Lowell.
That's the way to go, right?
Yeah,
It's way cheaper to go to Middlesex first.
Right, right.
No offense, UMass Lowell.
And they are coming back to help out with the after-school program. So these were the recipients of the programs, and now they're coming back and giving back to the community. So one of the objectives of our organizations is to empower these refugee populations to not only find employment and become self-supported, self-sufficient, but also politically involved and engage in the community to give back to the communities. And we have seen signs of all these activities among the Burmese communities. Yes.
So one of the things that we've talked about with other groups coming in, particularly late 19th century, early 20th century, there's lots of mill jobs, there's thousands of jobs. You don't necessarily need to know English to get one of those jobs. And so lots of oral histories talk about people coming and like 2 days later they're working full time.
Right.
I imagine that's a little bit more difficult for I know it is for other groups coming in, but I would assume something similar for the Burmese as they're finding their way to Lowell. Getting a decent, well-paying job is not such an easy task.
That is correct. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why many of them moved out. When they got here, they had a hard time finding employment. But I would say 99% of them have gotten a job right now. And once you started getting a job at someplace, and then if you prove yourself to be such a hardworking, reliable, dependable worker, then you can start bringing your own people, so people within your network can also benefit from this. So we have that situations where quite a few of them are now working at the sewing machine industry factory in Haverhill. So they're not really getting
suits.
Yes, I think so.
Suits, right?
Yes.
Wow, that just really ties it all together.
Men's Warehouse. They make suits for Men's Warehouse.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Textile work for the refugee population.
Right.
Yeah.
It fits.
So yes, but it's still very difficult, and then again, the rent is still so high, and especially for the past 3-4 years, the rent has gone up on average of $50 to $100 per year, and if
wages are not going up in that way.
Not really. So that's
So in terms of, again, sort of trying to think through comparisons with different groups that have made their way into the city, have people started any kind of religious institution, and or like one of the things that happens in Lowell a lot is food, right? And groups start a restaurant somewhere and sort of say, we're here, here's our restaurant. Have those things happened yet, or is it because the population's smaller, it's a little bit more difficult to get those things done?
The population is small, so it's difficult to get things done. But we started establishing connection with some of the more established churches here. So, for instance, the Burmese, we use a space at Calvary Baptist Church. And so and we got a space in the basement where we worship. And then Burma is not just linguistically diverse, but also religiously diverse. So we also have a group of minority ethnic members who are Catholic. So they go to, I think, St. Paul or St. Peter Church here.
St. Patrick's, maybe?
St. Patrick's, sorry. Right.
There was a St. Peter's, and there probably was a St. Paul's too, somewhere in Lowell. So
start with Saint.
Just start naming saints.
Yes.
You can't go wrong in Lowell.
Exactly.
Catholic Church, name a saint. You got
yes, there you go. And then some of them are Buddhists, so they go to a monastery in a Buddhist monastery in a Buddhist temple in Malton, I think. So they're they're connecting themselves with different religious organizations. But we have not. I would love to see a Burmese restaurant being set up here because I love food, and however we sell a lot. We make a majority of our funding come proud selling food at Lowell Folks Festival, and we're very famous for our food. We try with some of the business professors from UMass Lowell to come up with the idea about food truck.
Some kind of
But then again, we found out that it was very expensive and too many procedures that we have to go through, and we gave up on the idea. But that will be one of the things that we'd like to do in the future.
Yes, I would like
look
to
for
see
the food
that.
truck.
Yeah,
Yes.
I did see a Burmese food tent at the Points of Light festival recently over at Ecumenical Plaza, which is, I think, a really great place to have something like that with all of the people and coming together to celebrate, you know, different backgrounds, and especially between the Greek church and the Irish church, and having that history right there.
Exactly.
I think that was
that's one of my favorite sort of iconic spots in Lowell, when you talk about Lowell's history, sort of standing right in between both of those incredible structures and saying, how's this possible? Right? And how is it possible back then that we could somehow, with fits and starts, but sort of get along? And why has it become so much more problematic now in terms of immigrants and refugees, and why we're, as a nation, why we're still, we seem to always be grappling, right, with this issue of whether we want to let people in or we want to create a wall. And that I was looking at cartoons this morning for some other project I'm working on in immigration history, and starting in the 1870s, there are anti-immigrant cartoons that use a wall as a metaphor for keeping people out. So sort of across this long 150-odd year history that we've been looking at, the wall is always there, and yet you're describing a community that's able to fit in and grow and prosper, and now a bunch of young people are getting post-high school education and sort of beginning to make their way. So it seems to work, and yet we're still in fits and starts as a society.
And another things about the Burmese community here is I see a great sense of contribution, wanting to give back to the community. So at Points of Light, we have 20 volunteers from the Burmese community. So this is something that is so wonderful that I really want to celebrate. I'm really proud of this representing this community. And during the elections here for the city council, you see Burmese people holding signs for the candidates. And we have this practice since they got here, even when they did not even have the right to vote. They're very much politically engaged and involved.
Wow. And that's the thing that we've talked about too across all of these centuries, is these groups that are coming in, gaining political power and just a say in what's going on. Do you see that with the Burmese community over the last 10 years, that they've maybe gotten as politically engaged as they are being heard?
Well, we don't have a candidate, right, elected candidate who would represent Burmese, but we do have some candidates that we supported over the years, and so that is one form of political participation. The other form of participation is connecting to the service provider to persuade them to provide certain kind of services to make them more available to the Burmese populations. And we have been very successful. And again, because of the high level of unity among the Burmese community. So for instance, we're able to persuade the state government, the motor vehicle registry department to allow Burmese to take the learner's permits in Burmese, and that was not available before, right? And then we work with the public, lower public schools to help us by providing a teacher to help us with the after-school program, and they have been very good, and they help us for the past for the past 4 years. But last year, their funding got cut. But then again, like I said, we don't really depend on any funding. Our programs don't get stopped because we don't get any support. We continue with the participation and involvement of the volunteers within the community and outside the community, especially from UMass Lowell.
That is amazing. Unity amongst the community
Right.
is really what gets anything going and
Right.
what makes things happen.
Right.
I want to know, so starting Seydanar, there must have been some challenges and obstacles that you had to face. I mean, aside from just helping refugees resettle, because there are just so many barriers that come along with that. What were some challenges that you faced starting Seydanar?
Well, there are many challenges, especially shortages of resources, shortage of manpower. So, but and then, yeah, shortage of finance, right? And then here in the United States, you need a lot of, you need to know the rules and the regulations. You can, in Burma, you can set up a club or organization and you don't need to register, right? Here, you know, once you become a little bit formally organized, then you have to find out to make sure that you have a legal assistance. You have to make sure that you are complying with all the rules and regulations. If you have volunteers, then they have to go through query check. Tons and tons and tons of paperwork, and we are all spread out thin. Like I said, all of us are volunteers, and there are not many of us who can spend a lot of time working on these issues. So I would say that that's a big challenge of running Seydanar.
But you've become so self-sustaining and with all of these volunteers now, so you must be doing something right.
To some extent.
But speaking of the barriers, what are some barriers? We know we talked about cost of living, we talked about finding work. What are some other barriers that you might find as a refugee trying to resettle, specifically here in Lowell?
Well, it depends on different phases, right? When they first came here, they had language barrier. Everybody had language barrier, and language is a key to finding out everything and cultural shocks, and so that would. But now, as the time goes, move on, more and more people can now speak and understand the language, and they have jobs. So it's not so much of a challenge, but still many of them don't really understand the rules and the regulations, right? And especially in terms of raising children. In Burma, you know, there are different cultural expectations and understanding of how to raise your child. But here, you know, they were very surprised to see that the government got involved in a lot of the family issues, and that was a shock for them. And so they're still trying to, and then many of them, one of the problems that we've been facing is that many of them, for some reason, got into car accidents. Yes. So either the insurance went up, and insurance is so expensive, right? The car insurance, or they're having trouble with transportation. So recently we have been, and sometimes they're the victim. They're not the one who, you know, caused the accidents. And it's, I have one of the a member who is accident prone. His car got hit 4 times already. So, and that was not even his fault, right? And then they were surprised that the insurance will go up, and it doesn't matter. So those are all these cultural shocks that they
and it's interesting, right? Because transportation can be easier in Boston, let's say, at least it's supposed to be with the MBTA and other stuff, but it's way too, so if Lowell is expensive, Boston is even more expensive, right? So sometimes where people end up is not where there's public transportation. And so getting to a job in Haverhill, or getting to a job in Nashua, or getting to a job, I know there's some startup clothing factories now in Lawrence as well, but getting from Lowell to Lawrence, if you have to be there at a specific time, we don't do that well in this country in general, right? And so then that just becomes problematic, and then trying to afford a car, as you say, insurance and whatever, all just much more difficult.
Right.
In terms of more people coming, so you're saying that, so In terms of Burmese and refugee camps in Thailand, I'm assuming there's still a significant number of people.
100,000.
100,000.
Yes.
And so how many people annually, how many Burmese annually come in?
I think probably between 4,000 to 10,000 per year.
Okay.
Right? But since the government moved toward democracy, semi-democratic transition in 2011, efforts have been going on to repatriate these refugees back to Burma. So that's another movement that has been ongoing. So we don't see as many refugees coming in, especially into Lowell, for the past 3 or 4 years. We had the influx maybe around 2008, 2009, 2010, and now it seems like we're stabilized, and probably we may not have more refugees, but that depends on the how many international institutes can bring in
each given year, right?
Yes.
Wow. And so with the repatriation, do you think a lot of these refugee camps will see dwindling numbers? Is that a positive thing?
There is a stalemate right now because some refugees do not want to go back to inside the country unless they are guaranteed of 100% safety and security, and it seems like the government has not been able to guarantee that, and many of them has already lost their homes once they left for the refugee camps. Their lands and their houses were already taken over by someone else. So there's a big problem that they still have to resolve it. So a few of them started going back, but not in a great proportion that the government would like to see. Yes.
Where are other places that we've seen Burmese refugees resettling?
Minnesota, Indiana. I think they have thousands there, and Nebraska. Yes, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yes, and
wow.
So
Nebraska seems like a odd place for. I mean, no offense, Nebraskans, if you're out there listening. It just seems like an odd place for somebody estranged in a way from their own culture to be dropped into. Right? I mean, that's probably my stereotype of Nebraska. That it's just corn and stuff.
Right. Michigan. They also go to Michigan. But
Michigan would make sense to me, since there definitely have been in history immigrant populations, refugee populations that have ended up in Michigan. Michigan has a large Middle Eastern population.
Yeah. And their preferred choices, destination for these Burmese refugees because of the housing. The rent is so cheap, right? $400, $500 per month here. And one of the main challenges they have been facing over the last 2 or 3 years is the rise in rent.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on today and educating us all on the Burmese population and how they've resettled to Lowell. If we wanted to learn more about Sadanar and the work that you're doing, where could we find that?
Well, we have an office in downtown Merrimack 144 in the basement. So that's where we have the after-school programs. We have all the programs, English classes. So and then you can also email me, Ardeth_Thawnghmung @uml.edu, or you can call me at my office to learn more about Sadanar.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in today for History in Lowell. Until now.